Welcome to the CodeAbility podcast, where we amplify the voices of people with disabilities in computing. I'm Meredith Moore, an assistant professor of computer science at Drake University. CodeAbility exists to build community and promote accessibility in computing, one story at a time. This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the National Science Foundation's Broadening Participation in Computing Alliance, Access Computing. For over a decade, Access Computing has been dedicated to making computing more accessible. Whether you're a developer, educator, or advocate, we hope these conversations inspire you to think differently about technology and the power of inclusive design. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Kayla Williams. Kayla is passionate about tech and making sure it's accessible and inclusive to everyone. When we recorded this episode back in December 2022, she was diving into her role at General Motors, where she's now a technical product owner. In her current role, Kayla works closely with teams across the company to gather requirements, manage project backlogs, and ensure secure, smooth product releases that meet the mark for both customers and regulators. Before GM, Kayla was all about tech risk management and IT compliance at Eli Lilly, where she brought her expertise in biometric authentication to keep things running smoothly. She holds a master's in cybersecurity from Purdue with a bachelor's from the University of Michigan. Outside of work, she's on boards of Deaf Kids Code and the National Society of Black Engineers, making an impact on digital inclusion. I can't wait for you to hear her insights on accessibility, tech, and her journey in this industry. Before we begin, I want to note that this podcast operates independently of my teaching and research roles at Drake University. However, it does align with my broader mission to promote accessibility in computing and build inclusive spaces. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, welcome. Today on the CodeAbility podcast, we have the wonderful Kayla Williams joining us. Welcome, Kayla. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to go ahead and start and just let Kayla introduce herself a little bit and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Awesome. All right. So my official title is a IT business analyst at General Motors. It's pretty fun. It's always something to do. And then I just finished with grad school, so that's pretty exciting. Went to end of the year. Pretty involved with disability, advocating, accessibility for works. And I guess we get a little bit more into it as we go on.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations on just graduating. One of my first things I like to start with is talking about how did you get into technology? Like, was this something that you knew you were going to do forever, or is it something that you kind of just fell into, or what was that process like?
Yeah, so honestly, growing up, you're always trying to figure out what you want to do, right? You go to a doctor, you go wherever, you're like, how did you get into this career? So for the longest, I really was pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor, surgeon, the full works. And then around high school, I started to hear a little bit more about technology, and I kind of got curious. And then what I liked most about it was it's less school. You get to make money quicker. So that was my motivation. And then I liked all the different pros. So then when I went to college, I knew I wanted to get into the technology field. And then since then, I've liked it.
Awesome. Yeah, I had a similar experience. I feel like I wanted to go pre-med at first, and then I didn't know what computer science was, but I knew I was good at some of the tech stuff, and got put in a random computer science class my first semester of college, and like loved it and was good at it. So, and now here I am, a computer science professor. So I feel like it's never, and especially in technology, it seems like it's rarely the case that you just know that you want to be a computer scientist from day one. So it's always interesting hearing the stories that people have. So you said it was in high school for you that you kind of got interested in it. Was that a particular class or teacher or?
I think in general, I just knew I was good at math, and I was kind of looking into different careers related to math. And I kept seeing anything tech related, so it made me really curious, right? And then, we don't get the exposure, I don't think, right away, especially like K through 8th grade, you don't get a lot of exposure to tech side. So really my exposure is really college. I didn't even do my first coding line of code till I was in college. So high school, I wasn't knew very much. But when you hear the word coding, you're kind of like, okay, I hear coding, but I don't really know what it is. So that was my experience. So I really got into it in college, and I liked it.
Nice. I think there's also kind of a stigma around it, right? There's a
Hmm.
stigma that it's kind of hard, it's tough, it's going to be a terrible class, it's going to be awful. But really, I think like so many people just don't understand that. Like I say this almost every episode so far, but it's something I'm really passionate about. Is that computer science is like a creative power tool, right? You can build whatever you want.
And I know what you mean. I remember when I did my first final code, I'm like, wait, it's a hello world on my screen. Wait, what happened?
Yeah, and I think it's also something about resiliency, right? There's not very often where you like your whatever you're doing yells at you in red letters and capitals and tells you that you're doing something wrong or doesn't work.
Definitely agree with that.
So you also mentioned accessibility a little bit in your something that you're very passionate about. Can you tell me a little bit about like how you learned about accessibility?
Yeah, so I didn't know the actual official term was accessibility, right? So what I heard growing up was accommodation, being an advocate for yourself. So I will say, me being deaf and having a cochlear implant, my parents are very much on, if you need something, speak up. Don't be shy. They were very, forthcoming with that, right? So that's how I got into it. I had a lot of different experiences with not getting what I needed and had to advocate for myself. And then I also had experiences where I was in spaces where people understood and just like, oh, hey, here you go. This is what you need, right? So that's how I got into accessibility. And then, of course, having a cochlear, right? It's that mixture of technology and then a mixture of that accessibility. So that's pretty much how I got into it. And then I also think meeting a lot of spaces where I was the only deaf one that had to advocate for myself pretty much all of the time. So that's a mixture of how I got into it. I can go on for days with the experience I've had. But I think in my case, it's very important for me to have to tell people and be upfront with my deafness because there's assumptions of how deafness can look, right? There's different levels to it. So I think it's important to have those conversations with people, right? Because I know in my culture, right, there's not a lot of people cochlears I have interacted with personally, right? So it's not as common, right? So I have to have conversations like, yes, I'm deaf, but I understand when I'm wearing it, I can hear you, but I'm still deaf at the end of the day because without it, I'm still deaf.
I'm curious. So, at what age did you get the cochlear? Were you born hearing or born deaf, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I was actually born deaf. I was born that way. And then I didn't get the cochlear implant until I was 2 years old or 10 months. It was a lot of discussions going back and forth in terms of which route to take, right? So for my parents, it was definitely brand new, in terms of, okay, how do we advocate? How do we help our child? What's best for her as a deaf person, right? How I got into the cochlear was just more so from the standpoint of, unfortunately, that we are in a world where people are not as accommodating. And that was the ultimate choice of, we think the cochlear would be best. And that's just their point of view. But I do also want to point out that there is no right or wrong. If there is a deaf person who has a cochlear or doesn't have a cochlear, there is no right and wrong. That's all comes down to a preference and cultural ties, and the list can go on. But so I've been deaf my entire life, had a cochlear since 2 years old, 10 months. And then I went to a school program where it was predominantly for students who were deaf and had cochlear implants. So I wanted to verbally speak. Orally, communication is the best word, I would say. So that's how I got into it, and years of speech therapy outside of that program. So that's how I have this oral communication background. But I also did kind of dive into sign language, American Sign Language, every so often, but I don't have enough people to practice with, right? So I would say I'm connected to both. I just wanted to make that distinguish for those who may be new into understanding the deaf world, that there are different levels, but American Sign Language is a big part of the deaf culture.
Awesome. Let's move on a little bit and talk about some of the cool things that you've done. I saw that you are on the board for Deaf Kids Code. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and like what Deaf Kids Code does and how you got involved with them?
Yeah, so it's a funny story. So I used to live in Indianapolis for a job, and that was my first job out of college, right? And I remember volunteering actually for another organization, and I saw it was like a fair type of environment where young kids could come in, learn about different orgs and different companies, just kind of exposing them to careers and that kind of thing. So I remember reading a list of all the different people and companies that would be there, and I saw Deaf Kids Code. I've never heard of anything like that before. So of course I got excited. So I was like, okay, when I go there, I'm going to find these people. I'm just motivated, right? I'm excited. As I explained earlier, how with the deaf culture, right, just wanting more ties with it. So, okay, let me find this group. And I found them. And I said, hey, I know I'm supposed to be volunteering for another group. I have like a 5-10 minutes, but I just want to pop in and just kind of say, hey guys, I'm deaf. This is a cool program. Can you tell me more? And then I end up meeting with the founder, and she's super sweet. And then I met a lot of other people, team and parents, just kind of talking. They had their younger kids who were deaf. And we just kind of got into that whole conversation, right? And they were so excited, like, you just found our table. What? So we pretty much kept in touch then. And my involvement has been mainly just speaking on panels or just that kind of nature. So it's been a really cool experience just to have that opportunity. But Deaf Kids Code in general is more so focusing on exposing people to coding, and particularly those who are deaf, can be hard of hearing, hearing impaired. There's so many different layers what people prefer to be called. So that is the high level they're all about. They're always doing different things, and they connect with a lot of other organizations and partners. They're really trying to increase the exposure, and then also trying to increase, having more deaf kids into college become more involved in the tech field, because I'm pretty sure we all know it's very low in general. That's always my assumption, just from my experience. So it's been really cool, though. I've met a lot of cool people. So that's my experience with Deaf Kids Code.
Awesome. It sounds like a great program. I hadn't heard of them, but I would definitely be interested in learning more and maybe seeing what kind of things that they do. So you mentioned something about language in there. And normally, like in the first 5 minutes of this podcast, I like to ask about what language you prefer. So I know when I was in grad school, I had the idea that person first language was the only way to go, drilled into me, which I didn't realize until later is not necessarily true, right? So there's this whole idea between person first language and identity first language. And I think especially deaf community, it's very common to have people who are in the deaf community say that they're deaf and use identity first language because there is that community tied to it. But it's also such an individual choice. So I always like to ask people and see what language do you prefer? How would you like us to refer to you if we're talking about your disability or with respect to your disability? Or do you identify as having a disability too, is another question.
Yeah, so I think for me, I've always said I was deaf. Even my parents were like, you're not hearing impaired, you're deaf. It's a no-brainer. And I remember at the time, there was this confusion, right? Because I'm around all kids who, quote unquote, we would say hearing. So for me, I'm like, is it hearing impaired? I mean, I wear it, but then, so it's like kind of that mini identity crisis, I would say. But my parents are very on, hey, you're deaf. I remember they would have sign language, or if they meet someone that was deaf or cochlear, like, hey, Kayla, we met this person. Maybe you should talk to these people or whatever, right? But they were a big part of making sure that I understood what the deaf culture is like, what it is, which is a big deal considering that they don't have direct ties to the deaf culture because they're not deaf, which is totally understandable. So in terms of disability, I don't look at it as a disability, but I do understand as if I'm applying for a job or if I need accommodations, if it say, do you have a disability? I say yes, in terms of I might need accommodation. I might need these things. But in terms of deafness, it's more so looked at, this is my identity, this is who I am, it's just a part of myself. So I often just say, oh yeah, I'm a deaf Black woman. Oh, that's nothing, right? So that's just how I go with it. It's not like, oh, I'm a Black woman with a disability. So that's more how I approach it. But like you said, everyone has their own preference, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's my personal preference. Is I like the term deafness.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I'm trying to make it just a thing that like it's okay to ask too. I teach a lot about disability and accessibility in my classes, and whenever I start talking about disability, I see these students just kind of freeze up, like they just don't know how to talk about it. And I did this thing where I put some pictures of people with disabilities on the screen, and I was like, okay, in your groups, talk about it. Like, how would you talk about these people if you were to say these sentences? How would you do it? And then we started talking about how to talk about disability, and really just giving people a framework and some general preferences, and talking about the difference between identity first and person first. Really, I think gives them some tools to be able to better support and be an ally for people with disabilities that they encounter throughout their careers. So something that I'm pretty passionate about, and I think even just having these conversations and showing that people have different preferences and that's perfectly fine is pretty important. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, and I think it's valid that you said, right? Honestly, most of the time when I meet people right away, I will go, I'm deaf, but side note, it's totally fine to ask me questions. I will not be offended, even if you think it's potentially an ignorant question. I always tell people, especially if they have good character, we're good friends, or whatever the nature may be, I would say, I'd much rather you ask me than walk to a stranger and say, so, blah, 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 and then the reaction is not the greatest reaction, right? So I have friends, coworkers, family that is very like, okay, Kayla, I need to ask this question, right? So I'm more open with that because I'd much rather us have that conversation, and then people feel more comfortable, actually. And I get 1,000 questions, right? But they're so happy to know we can have this kind of conversation. It's not going to be awkward. I think it's just a matter of the person's preference. I do understand there may be some people who prefer to not talk about it, which is valid. And then there are some people who are like, I'm just eager. I want someone to just ask me these questions. I don't, so it just depends on, I would say, the space and the person. I do think there are some people that's pretty curious to know more about it, but they're also curious in the sense of, do you need something from me, or what works for you? Those kind of curiosity questions. It's more so my experience has been. So I think it's a valid point that it is that kind of, ooh, should I?
All right, cool. So let's maybe transition and talk a little bit about the work that you're doing at GM now. Can you tell me a little bit about how you decided to go to GM and what kind of things that you do there and what your experience has been so far?
Yeah, so I decided to join GM earlier this year, and my role is a mix of everything. So high level, I work in the manufacturing world. So in case people do not know, General Motors is an automotive company. And my focus more so on working with the systems in the manufacturing side of things and any projects going on in that space. So I'm kind of like your liaison between the dev team and between our customers, who we sometimes refer to as business. So how that looks is that it can be, there's this particular project, right? And the business could be a plant, someone at the plant saying, hey guys, I want an upgrade on this system, or I want to do a new project, or these new cool things, anything tech related, right? And then they come to us as business analysts, and we pretty much have discussions. What is their requirement? What do they need? What's their time frame? All these different things that they need, right? And then now we're meeting with devs to say, hey, look, we have this request. Do you think this is feasible? What's your time frame? What does this look like? How can we break it down for you guys in terms of different tasks, time, the whole works, right? And then once that's happening, we pretty much now organize different pieces that team work on. It's the best way to say it. And then now dev team is working on their things. Development team, developers. I do say dev team a lot. And then from there, it can be, we as business analysts are creating test cases to basically give to business to make sure, hey, is this what you wanted? Did the dev team meet your needs? Or pretty much working with dev team to say, hey guys, is it feasible to get this done? How is this going? So it's a lot of like discussions, a lot of organizations, and a lot of having to understand how all of these technologies work, right? So it's pretty, I would say it's pretty much a lot of different moving parts. I hope I didn't lose you there, but I was trying to break it down as much as I could. But that is pretty much like the liaison. It's the best way to say it. So pretty much working with that team, helping business get what they need, because ultimately that's who has to be happy. They're our customers. And that's pretty much what I do.
I love that you are kind of being the liaison, like you said, between the users and the business need and the devs. And you can speak both languages, right? You're able to talk to the devs and understand and speak the technical, but then also be able to understand the human needs. Not that devs can't understand the human needs, but it's too much to ask them to be integrated super fully into the customer base and understanding the business side of things, and then also focusing on implementing the technical side of things, especially at a bigger company like GM. So it's also really great to see that there are other opportunities in technology besides just like coding all day, right? Or besides like being only
that's why I like it.
Exactly. I know I found that I always really enjoy the human side of coding as well. I always did user experience research and then now teaching, right? So I get to do the technical side of it, but I also am talking to humans all day, every day, and really enjoy the social and the like just the human centric side of it. So it's really great to see that you found a spot where you can do both as well.
Yeah, it was very important to have that. I'm very extroverted.
Awesome. So I know you're relatively new at GM. What has that looked like, onboarding to a new company and being deaf? Is there anything that you've had to, like, have you had to ask for any specific accommodations, or have there been any like hiccups along the way so far that you've had to find your way around?
Yeah, it's totally valid. So coming into GM this year, right, it's still in a virtual space. So this was, fortunately, I did have this similar experience at the last company with the universal space. So there has been a few times. So a lot of our meetings is through Microsoft Teams, which is great. And me having a cochlear implant, I like to call in with my phone because it's Bluetooth. And a lot of laptops are now Bluetooth. So I can't use regular headphones to just plug into the meetings, right? Or I will just have the speaker on, but it just wouldn't be as clear for me, or everyone would just hear my conversations. So for me, there have been a few times where I join a meeting and you can't phone in. So I directly message the person, kind of just saying, hi guys, I know this is not a phone in option. And sometimes they just say, hey, just kind of curious. It's not a problem, but just curious, which is totally valid. So I've explained, I'm deaf, I have this cochlear, I like to call in. They're like, oh, okay, that's no problem. Thank you so much for sharing, right? So now they have that knowledge. And then they make those changes. It's not a problem. Closed captioning is offered, which is great, on Teams. And that's super helpful. There has been times when I'm literally in person and I will actually join the Microsoft Teams just for the closed captioning. And that's been totally cool, right? So I have people kind of look at my laptop like, what are those words? And I explain closed captioning, and people get kind of like, oh, so we're talking, and then the words come up on the screen. And I'm like, why do you do that? And I go, oh, because I'm deaf. They're like, oh, that is so cool. Teams does that. Oh, so then now they're kind of like, oh, now I know something, right? So people kind of get excited to know about those tools. I definitely had to be open with people and just kind of say, hey guys, if I don't respond, I'm not ignoring you. I probably just didn't hear you. I'm so sorry. And then also with masking, right? That was such a challenge. I'm a huge lip reader. And then with the mask, it just sounds like mumble. And then we couldn't get close to people for a certain time, right? So I had to say, honestly, usually I read lips. I don't hear half the conversation. The mask is just covering your mouth. I have no clue what you're saying. And sometimes people say, you know what, if you're comfortable with it from a distance, I could take it off, or, I could speak up. What's your comfort level, right? So just having those conversations, honestly, I think help people realize that I want to be there. I want to be a good employee, a good team player, opposed to, does she just not want to be here? When now they have the knowledge of, oh, she just can't hear. Okay, that's understandable. So I think it's really important to have those conversations with people. People are so eager and so happy to have that information because now they can't misread however your reaction may be. So I think just having that conversation and just having to be open and having to be comfortable with opening. I know that's a challenge sometimes. I understand everyone has different experiences, but in the work world, I have to be very open. So that's been super helpful. It's been honestly a good experience, just sharing that and just getting what I need.
Awesome. And I will say, so you were talking about closed captions. So anybody who uses PowerPoint or Google Slides, it is built in. You can add captions really easily. I think it's like Command-Shift-C if you're on a Mac for Google Slides, and it automatically just adds captions underneath. And I use that in all my classes. Whatever I'm presenting, I always have captions on. And my Zoom, I always record it with Zoom. And if I'm presenting something that doesn't have the captions built in from slides or from present PowerPoint, like I have the Zoom captions up and on the screen. And I don't know. It's just something that so I have ADHD, and captions help me focus really a lot better because I can see both, like it's multimodal. You're both visual and auditory to be able to understand what they're saying. It's the same kind of idea. If I'm reading captions, it's engaging my brain on multiple levels, which helps me focus a lot better than if I'm just like hearing the audio instead. So there's my tip is that you can easily do captions on slides and PowerPoint, and I think it's an underutilized feature that is super, super simple. Does GM have an ERG, Employee Resource Group for people with disabilities, or do they have one, and if so, have you interacted with it at all?
So we do have employee resource groups, and then it's Yammer Group. It's kind of like a Microsoft social media tool. So I have joined those recently there's a disability group, there is a Black group, there's a group for women in technology. Those are the ones I'm in. There is a group for young, career professionals. There's all of these different groups, right? And I haven't had a chance to be active in them yet just because I'm so relatively new. But it is nice to know those are options and that there are spaces where I can kind of say, you know what, I need something, or what are you guys talking over here? So it's cool to have those options. So.
Cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I know some people really lean heavily on those, and some people just are like, I know I'm in several of those groups, but I'm a lurker. I like to just lurk and watch and see what's going on, and not participate too much, but gather information. So we talked a little bit about some obstacles. How about in school for students who might be considering pursuing computing, like? And this is we'll ask a more specific question about advice to listeners, but I guess what advice do you have for students who might be deaf or hard of hearing about studying computing or studying technology in school and being able to come out and be successful in the tech world? What advice do you have?
Yeah, I was laughing because honestly, looking back, I have a lot of interesting experiences, both good and bad. I think in general, like we talked about earlier, like stigma. There's a lot of stigma around the tech field. I think it's more so it's just been set one way for so long. And now we're getting all of these different groups, minority groups breaking into this industry, right? That's always been set a certain way for so long. I would say it's the best way to say it. I would say in school, it is okay I would say don't put too much stress on I have to be in this certain role when I get out of college, because honestly, there are so many different jobs out there that may not be talked about in college that we may not be aware of. I wasn't even aware about business analyst roles. I just kind of fell into this, but honestly. And then I think it's so important to really research the different roles out there, I think sometimes we put a lot of emphasis into you can only be a software engineer. There's not this understanding of there's user research, UX, UI. That's what I went to undergrad for, right? We don't think about, oh, I don't have to be a coder and still be in tech. You could be a project manager, product owner, which is technically what I am if you're talking agile. But there's so many things out there that can exist. You don't have to only know how to code. You can be a creative person, meaning you want to do UX, or maybe you're more organized, so you want to do PA, business analyst. And then when you're in college, let's say you get one degree, it doesn't mean it's the end of the road for you. You have your undergrad degree, you got your bachelor's degree. We know tech is not the easiest field to get into. There are coding boot camps you can do. There are master's program as an option. There are so many there's rotational programs you can get into after college to kind of explore what you like and don't like. Like, there's so many options out there. I don't think it's necessary to put so much stress on those 4 years in college as if that's just going to be your only. I think when you're thinking those 4 years, it's just 4 years. You don't realize you have 20 plus years to kind of dig into different things with your career, right? I think it's best to network, talk to different people, see what their careers are about. Talk to people, see how can you get into those different careers. I would say if you have LinkedIn, if you don't, please create a LinkedIn. Connect with people. Keep in touch with people. You never know who may be recruiting or not recruiting. Those things can go a long way. So I say just put less stress on yourself and just know it is okay. Everything does not have to be figured out in those 4 years. That is totally okay. But I just want to put out there mainly, I'm saying explore what's out there, see what's out there. There's so many avenues to get into tech roles. I'm seeing people come from HR, and work there 10 years, transition to tech. It is so many different ways to get into tech. I think it's the key point I'm making.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely more than one entry point, right? You don't need to become a software engineer at Google the second that you get out of undergrad.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that all the time. Sometimes it does, and that's great. But there's many, many different avenues and many different companies too, right? If the first company you try isn't a great fit, it doesn't necessarily mean that coding or computer or technology isn't a good fit. Maybe it's just the company wasn't a good fit, you know? And you talked about networking. So what are some ways that you'd recommend students to network? I know you. So I think I saw in your background that you went to Grace Hopper, right? Or I think that's actually how. I think it was Richard Ladner suggested that I interview you for this podcast because he saw you on a panel at Grace Hopper. I think.
Oh,
So
that's awesome. Thank you. I did not attend Grace Hopper, but I was a panelist. And I attended the Tapia conference, which is pretty much for minorities and computing, which includes, women, people of color, and disabilities. I had that option as well. I've also attended a conference called NESB, which is National Society of Black Engineers. So for me, attending conferences makes a huge difference. And I do want to put out there, if you volunteer, it helps with funding. If there's scholarships out there, I understand conferences are not cheap. But conferences is a good way to network. I think just even volunteering with different orgs or also doing internships or some type of job opportunity, it helps with networking. I remember being at work kind of going, okay, who do I need to network? These are my interests. Oh, this person's in this area. Let me talk to this person. Let me kind of, pick their brain, right? So I think just having to be comfortable with reaching out, making those, sign up for meetings, arranging meetings, sending emails, even just looking on LinkedIn and just saying, you know what, this sounds like a cool person. Let me just message this person. I've gotten that. Sometimes people just message me, hey, can I just know a little something? Sure, go for it, right? So just finding all these different ways. We have so many resources. Conferences, LinkedIn, and meeting people and volunteering is my 4 ways.
Awesome. Yeah, those are all great. And I absolutely 100% agree. What's your overall advice to listeners, either with or without disabilities, who are considering pursuing a career in technology? It could also be some for people who have disabilities or don't, whatever. What's your advice to our listeners for pursuing a career in technology?
Yeah, so pursuing technology, I would say you'll have to figure it all out. Don't be overwhelmed. It's going to take some time to figure out what you like and don't like. I say take each experience as if you're exploring your career. You're exploring yourself, right? Maybe one day you try coding and you say, you know what, this is not for me. That doesn't mean it's the end of the road technology-wise. You just have to find what you like in technology. So I would say explore, network, and just take each experience as a lesson. And that's really it. Don't stress about it. You're just exploring and you see what you like and don't like. I think it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing I like to ask is, so I know there's so many things when it comes to so many different like groups, like the Deaf Kids Code, the Access Computing, all these different resources that we've talked about, and a lot of these things just are underrepresented and are things that I wish more people knew about. So the question is, what's something you wish more people knew about? And it can be in terms of anything. So whether it's like, it could be computing, it could be technology, it could be disability, it could be whatever.
I can go both ways. So I would say in terms of disability, I guess I would say just be more open in terms of getting to understand. If people do open up sharing about the experiences, definitely try not to use words like, oh, I can relate if I can't relate. I think some people do not dislike the word anymore. Oh, I understand. I understand where you're coming from now. Me personally, I don't think it's friendly, but I know there may be some people may feel a little differently about that, right? So I would say definitely be understanding, be listening, and definitely be a good ally if you can, even if it's just simply is just engaging with that person or advocating. There's so many different ways to advocate and be an ally. It's a matter of what you're comfortable with. It all works. And then in terms of computing, I would just say it's a cool field. It's flexibility. It's where the money is. And there's less schooling. So just why not? But I would say go for it. If you're thinking about it, go for it.
Yeah, also work-life balance, right? Both of my brother and sister-in-law are surgeons, and I went the computer science path, and I went the computer science academic path, which means I have even more flexibility in my schedule than most average
Yeah.
technology, and it's definitely something I did not anticipate appreciating as much as I do. But being able to make my own schedule and work when I want to work is something that is pretty nice. Where instead of taking a call at 2 a.m, right? But
Right.
everybody has their own preferences and everybody finds their own niche. But I agree with you that technology it's paid well and fun, and you always have an opportunity to learn something new, right? It's so massive that there's always something different, always something new, always an unexplored corner to get to try some new stuff out.
Yep, never get bored.
Yeah, if you're bored in computer science, then I don't know. There's lots of good stuff. All right, I think we're getting to that point where it is time to do our TLDL, which is a concept I borrowed from the Computer Science Education podcast, where they do a too long didn't listen, right? So say our listeners got to or maybe it didn't get to this point, but they skipped to the end to see what this episode was about. What would you give right as a TLDL for our listeners? So too long didn't listen.
Long didn't listen. I would say high level. What are we talking about? I guess.
Yeah.
High level is definitely explore technology. Definitely have fun with it. Don't stress about it. Just see what's out there. Try it. If you fail, it's not failure. Just simply, it's not a rejection. It's just redirection to point you to something else better. If not, you learn something new. And if you have disability, if you are deaf or hard of hearing, however you preference is, do not be discouraged. It is possible. You can do it. You may have to go about it a little bit differently. You may have to There's nothing wrong with asking for accommodations. There's nothing wrong with advocating for yourself. Do not be shy. There's so many ways to go about it. So I would say don't be discouraged. Just go for it. Just try it. If you're thinking about it, I'm pretty sure you want to do it. So just go for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in to CodeAbility. I hope today's conversation encouraged you to think differently about accessibility in computing and the power of inclusive design. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and share CodeAbility with others who might find value in these stories. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible people who helped bring this podcast to life. This program was sponsored by Access Computing. The blanket was beautifully designed by one of my former students, Amelia Sims. As for the production, editing, and everything in between, that's me, Meredith Moore. We're always looking to amplify more voices and perspectives in tech, so if you or someone you know has a story to share, please email us at info@codeabilitypodcast.com or message us on our socials linked below. This material is based upon work supported by the National Science Foundation under grant number 2137312. Any opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this material are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Science Foundation. Together, we can create a more accessible and equitable tech community. Thanks again for listening, and I can't wait to connect with you in the next episode.